Imara's outlook for sugar consumption and sugar producers in Sub-Saharan Africa remains positive due to the impact of the three key drivers such as rising population, rising income levels in developing countries and rising urbanization rates. Well, these drivers are also assisting in galvanizing demand for sugar globally. Well, for more, I'm joined by Dexter Mahachi, who's an analyst at Imara Securities. Dexter, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. I think before we kick off, can we maybe try and give it some context with regards to looking at sugar producers in Sub-Saharan Africa? How do they compare with those globally?
I think globally, Southern Africa produces roughly about 3% of global supply in terms of sugar. We do have some of the most efficient sugar producers in the world, Swaziland being one of them, Malawi being another, producing sugar at roughly between 200 to 300 US dollars per ton. So we do have some quite competitive companies within Southern Africa.
Now, speaking of competitiveness, I know that we have mentioned that when it comes to the specific sector, it's highly regulated. Is this deterring investors to come and invest?
It is a major deterrent for some investors, but for others, because of the fact that sugar is such an integral part of our diets, they actually see it as a long-term growth area, particularly if you look at areas such as West Africa, where on average most countries are only producing about 50% of their sugar requirements. So there's quite a huge demand for sugar within Africa, so in part.
You spoke about West Africa. I know Dangote sugar is probably one of those standout stocks when you think about it. What is it that they're doing right that other regions or other sugar producers can learn from?
I think one thing that Dangote has been doing right is the expansion in capacity. What they've been looking at, they haven't been afraid to look regionally instead of just looking at supplying their own internal market. Nigeria consumes about 1.25 million tons of sugar per annum. Dangote's capacity is around about 1.44 million tons per annum. What they've been trying to do is to try and export some of their sugar to countries, to neighboring countries such as Ghana, Mali, and Senegal, which have a shortage in terms of supply. What that means is, in terms of profitability, the future outlook for them is quite good.
Let's talk about other regions. Speaking to our market watcher earlier on, we're speaking about how in Kenya at the moment we've had the parliamentary committee saying they need to stop giving licenses to other sugar mills. I mean, that industry is under quite a lot of pressure. Then we also have some of the protection measures by COMESA coming to an end at the end of, or the beginning of next year rather. I mean, what sort of implications would it have for sugar companies such as Mumias?
I think Mumias is one of those companies we look at as being in terminal trouble. Part of the problem is their business model. I think 95% or so of the actual sugar that they mill is supplied by small-scale farmers. And this is a big problem because the costs of production for Mumias are quite high when compared to other sugar producers, let's say in Malawi, such as Ilovo, which operate large plantations and as such can generate economies of scale from their production. The other issue with Mumias is they really have to turn around. They really have a lot of operational problems, partly the issue of cane theft, which has hit their profitability quite a bit. And if we really look at it, between now and March, I'm not too sure they can actually restructure that company and make it perform much better in the interim. So I think to a large part in our report, we were actually looking at avoiding Mumias altogether and looking at other companies such as Dangote, Ilovo Malawi, and even Hippo Valley Zimbabwe as well as being producers we can safely look at investors putting their money in.
So if I was a shareholder in Mumias, would this be, or if I was invested in that company, would you say I would need to get out? Is there no hope?
I would say basically there is a bit of hope because the Kenyan government has been looking at trying to urge COMESA to give them a little bit more time. I'm not too sure whether they will be able to restructure the company in time, even if they're given a year. Because the problems that they have, they are rather fundamental. And there needs to be a big overhaul in the sugar sector in Kenya for those companies to actually successfully make a profit in the next few years. If you'll actually see that some of the sugar producers in the region, such as Ilovo, Malawi, and even Omnicane in Mauritius, are looking at exporting into the Kenyan market. So all in all, that means there's going to be a very, competition is going to be much tougher for them going forward. So I would argue that if you are somebody who's looking at the medium term, it might be a good idea to look at other different investments.
You mentioned Mauritius there. Let's touch on Omnicane, because
Sure.
I think one of the things that they're doing very well is diversification. Should this be what other sugar producers should be doing?
I think it definitely is a good option. For Omnicane, they've managed to turn around their operations, and now about 65% of the revenues is now coming from energy and energy production. You'll find that they currently have the largest biomass producer of energy in Mauritius, and this has done quite well for them. And I think for other producers, producing ethanol and other energy products is quite a good option for them to opt into.
Let's talk about regulation, the regulatory environment again, because you said that's a very big issue. But if we talk about, the tariffs and so forth, I know the EU plays a very big part when it comes to that. Now they will be phasing some of their import quotas. How do you envisage that will be impacting on the sugar producers on the continent?
I think the countries which will be affected the most definitely are the ones that export the most sugar into the EU. This include Mauritius, Malawi, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. I think for the most part, if we look at the sugar producers in Mauritius, such as Omnicane, they are making headway in terms of turning around their operations and more or less retooling their industries to try and supply the regional markets more than the others. With respect to the other sub-Saharan African countries, we've seen them come together and form what is called the SADC Sugar Protocol, where they try to negotiate a way whereby they can compete with each other regionally without necessarily knocking each other's shirts off.
So there's definitely hope when it comes to the sugar industry on the Sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes, definitely, particularly if we look at the consumption patterns. They've been quite good.